Hi everyone, welcome to our fish basics video. After watching this video, you should be able to explain the general diversity of fishes, detail what makes a fish, give examples of unusual adaptations of fish, and describe how fish are classified based on evolutionary adaptations. So diverse fish are a really diverse group. They actually make up more than half of all the species of vertebrates on Earth. There are 515 families, over 60 orders, and of the almost 28,000 living species of fish, most of them are bony fish. So there's almost 1,000 species of cartilaginous fish, things like sharks, skates, and rays, and there's a little over 100 species of jawless fish, but most of them are bony fish. And if you ever wondered, when do I use fish or when do I use fishes for the plural of fish? If you're talking about multiple fish in one species, then fish is the plural. If you're talking about more than one species, it's fishes. So all the fishes in the ocean. There's a wide diversity of physiological characteristics and habitats that are inhabited by fish. So some examples: size. There's a great wide range in size of fish. The littlest fish is smaller than a centimeter, whereas the largest fish, the whale shark, which is a fish, it's not a whale, not a mammal, it can be up to 12 meters long. Fish can live in extreme conditions like alkaline springs. Those are places where the water is really basic, so it has really basic pH. And also in hypersaline lakes. So those are lakes that are really, really salty. And different species have adaptations to deal with those extreme environments. Some can live in sunless caves, some can live in temporary ponds that'll actually dry up. So some species have adaptations for breathing even when there isn't water. And some can live in anoxic swamps. So here we're talking about adaptations for surviving in extreme conditions, so that these species over time have adapted to live in these areas, and the individuals that had the characteristics that allowed them to survive and reproduce are the ones that passed on genes. And so over time, the species evolved to show those characteristics, those adaptations. Lifespan in fish can range from 10 weeks to 150 years. So again, lots of diversity within the fish taxa. So then what makes a fish if there's so much difference across different fish? Well, they're aquatic vertebrates, so they live in water. They're poikilothermic. Do you remember what that means? That their temperature varies. So it's kind of in opposition to homeothermic animals that keep a constant body temperature. Poikilothermic animals have a variable body temperature. Fish are ectothermic, deriving their body temperature from their environment. Their appendages are fins, so no arms and legs, fins. They use gills for respiration, no lungs. Their body covering is scales. Now, exceptions to some of these do exist. Like there's some fish that are adapted to maintain a relatively steady body temperature. And there are some fish that don't have scales. But in general, these are the characteristics that are common among fish. So this is the cool part. Some unusual adaptations of fish. So again, when we talk about adaptations, I want you to think about, why does that characteristic, or how does that characteristic allow individuals of this species survive and reproduce at a higher level, so that that trait persisted over time, over generations and generations? Some examples. So lungfish, this is a lungfish. They can remain dormant for up to 4 years in a drought. So they can live where water has dried up in mud. They'll curl up in the mud. There's a film that forms over their nose, and they can live there for up to 4 years until water comes back. They have a modified swim bladder that is modified to act like a primitive lung, so they can actually breathe atmospheric air. There are several species of Antarctic fish, several species of Antarctic fishes that have adaptation to live in water that is, the temperature of the water is lower than the freezing temperature for their blood. And what happens is there's actually two different ways. Different species use different approaches. There's some species that have a protein in their blood that acts as antifreeze. There's others that have glycogen in their blood, and that acts to prevent freezing. So pretty neat. Deep sea fish, there are some deep sea fish like the anglerfish that have jaws that open really wide and a pouch down here so that they can take in prey that's actually bigger than them. Reason being, they are hanging out so deep in the ocean. There are not very many prey items swimming back and forth all day long. If something comes along, they need to be able to eat it. And so that's the adaptation that allows for that. Another very interesting adaptation that we see in a lot of fish, but is pretty unique to fish, is gender change. So like switching from male to female in the course of one individual's life. Clownfish, like Nemo's, are an example of that. So each sea anemone typically has one breeding pair. And when within the breeding pair, when the breeding male dies, the breeding female becomes the breeding male, and an immature clownfish in the area will come in and become the breeding female of that pair. So it's really kind of an interesting dynamic that there's still lots of research being done on it. We know that hormones regulate those changes, but researchers are still trying to find out kind of the how exactly that all works. Fish display a wide variety of parental care. So lots of fish, the female lays the eggs, hopes that a male comes along, and that's the end of that. The other end of the spectrum is the seahorse, where female seahorse deposits eggs in the male's brood pouch. So this is a pouch on the male seahorse where the eggs are deposited in there, they develop in there, and when the eggs hatch, it looks like the male is giving live birth to the baby seahorses. That it can increases the survival of the seahorses because the eggs aren't getting preyed upon. They're nice and protected in there in that brood pouch. There are some fish that exhibit bioelectricity, like electric eels, where they use electricity to stun or sometimes even kill their prey. There's other fish that have the ability to produce light. So the anglerfish is one that you might have seen example of where light is produced. There are some fish that produce their own bioluminescence. With the anglerfish, it's actually a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that hang out on this kind of antenna-like projection, and the bacteria are the ones producing the bioluminescence or the light. So that's a pretty neat predatory tactic. There are other fish that their really cool adaptation is to avoid predation. So kind of the flip side, like a puffer fish that blows up to look big and scary to avoid predation. This diagram shows the relationship among groups of fish and to other vertebrates. So if we start here with vertebrates, we can branch off into the jawless vertebrates. So these are the hagfish, the lamprey, the agnathans, they're sometimes called. They have these kind of mouth parts. Doesn't that look pretty freaky? So they're sucking mouth parts. They don't have a jaw. Most of them are parasites. So this shows a bony fish with two of these jawless fish as parasites. So that's an adaptation. They don't have to go out looking for prey. They latch on, they get their nutrients from a host, and it's their kind of carved out little niche. Now, if we go to the other side of the tree, we have gnathostomes, so the jawed vertebrates. And those can be split up into two groups again, chondriichthyes, the cartilaginous fish, and then the bony fish. So cartilaginous fish, sharks, rays, skates, bony fish are all the other fish that aren't jawless, that don't have cartilage skeletons. And then within osteichthyes, the bony fish, those get split up again twice. The ray finned fish, actinopterygii. And these are, I think, everything on your list comes within actinopterygii, the ray finned fish. The other side is sarcopterygii. And there are only a few extant fish that are sarcopterygians. Coelacanth, so that's like the prehistoric fish that we thought was extinct until like the early mid 20th century. And they find them, they're way down deep in the ocean. Lungfish are also sarcopterygii, but there aren't a lot of instances of those species still extant. But common ancestor to the lungfish is also the common ancestor to our other vertebrates, our non-fish vertebrates. So amphibians, they're kind of the direct link to amphibians and other vertebrates. So it's just to kind of orient you with the different fish and how they fit in evolutionarily. So now I would like for you to go back and make sure that you can do each of these 4 things. Explain the general diversity of fishes, detail what makes a fish, give examples of unusual adaptations of fish, and be able to think about why did that adaptation help with survival and reproduction over time. Think about the different environments fish are inhabiting, and then describe how fish are classified based on evolutionary adaptations. I'm going to leave you with a joke. Why? No, not why. What did the salmon say when it swam into a wall? Damn. All right, folks, I'll see you in class.